on the NPO sector as both a target for exploitation and a critical component in preventing such activities. The FATF has established recommendations aimed at enhancing the oversight of NPOs, particularly Recommendation 8 and Immediate Outcome 10. Kenya's Mutual Evaluation Report highlighted our challenges with NPOs in this area, stressing the need for substantial improvement in our AML-CFT framework. In response to these challenges, we as a country undertook comprehensive risk assessment facilitated by Greenacre Associates. This assessment aimed to identify vulnerabilities across the diverse landscape of NPOs, which includes both local and international PBOs, faith-based organizations, and trusts. The methodology involved was very simple. It included qualitative and quantitative analysis. The findings of the assessment reveal critical insights into the risks that may expose the sector to misuse. They include misallocation of charitable funds, inadequate internal controls, and a lack of comprehensive training on AML-CFT measures. In addressing these vulnerabilities, it is essential to protect our organizations and also maintain public trust. In this regard, I extend my gratitude to the technical group for their dedication. Their data-driven approach has ensured that assessment reflects the sector's on-ground realities. A validation workshop to incorporate stakeholders' feedback was held, reinforcing our commitment to inclusivity and transparency. Key vulnerabilities identified included the potential for misappropriation of funds by actors exploiting the goodwill of charitable organizations, insufficient risk assessment protocols within organizations, and the need for greater awareness and education around AML-CFT standards. These findings lay the foundation for targeted strategies that will strengthen the resilience of our sector. And at this point, I wish to urge all NPOs, regulators, and community members to engage proactively with this report. Together, we can develop risk mitigation strategies tailored to our sector's unique challenges. Our commitment to compliance with AML-CFT regulations is paramount. By adopting best practices and enhancing internal controls, we can not only protect our organizations from exploitation, but also reinforce the integrity of the NPO sector. This will allow organizations to thrive and continue invaluable missions without compromising values. In today's engagement, I want to encourage active participation and discussions because your insights and experiences are critical as we navigate the complexities of protecting the NPO sector. As we move forward, let's work collaboratively to build a resilient NPO sector that is capable of withstanding the threat of terrorism financing. I want you to take full advantage of today's agenda, and other than the meaningful discussion that we are going to engage in, we should also use this opportunity to network. I want to thank you for your dedication, for this vital cause, and with our combined efforts, we can create a robust framework to ensure that Kenya's NPO sector remains the beacon of hope that it has always been, and progress in our society. With that, I wish to end my speech and welcome Mr. Victor Kikwech to make his remarks, after which our chief guest will also make his remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victor, and I would like to ride on the established protocols. And I represent the Global Center on Cooperative Security. And for those who I have not interacted with or met or worked with the Global Center before, we are an organization, an international non-governmental organization dedicated to a just and secure world. We work with government, civil society, and private sector to advance human rights-based responses to political violence, violent extremism, and injustices that drive them. So I work as a programs officer within the Global Center and responsible for our AML-CFT programs in Eastern Africa, Southern Africa, as well as Western Africa. And this is just one of the very many countries that we've done this risk assessment with, and we appreciate the support of the Kenyan government in doing so. The Global Center has been honored to support Kenya in deepening its anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism capacity since 2018. And as part of the technical assistance program funded by the US Department of State, the Bureau of Counterterrorism, we have been working together for more than 4 years now in various sectors of AML-CFT in the country. Kenya has made a high-level political commitment to fight against money laundering, terrorism, and its financing, and as a key economic hub, Kenya plays a critical role in detecting, disrupting, and degrading the financial capacities of violent extremist networks across the continent and beyond. So today you're here because we are gathered here to launch the Kenya Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment for non-profit organizations, where just a little bit later I'll be sharing a little bit more on the findings of our research. The risk assessment was commissioned by the government of Kenya, and it assesses the level of the nature of terrorism financing risk that faces the sector, and in line with the requirements of Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, Recommendation 8. So the process was led by a technical group comprising of the Public Benefits Organizations Regulatory Authority, the Financial Reporting Center, and we had representatives from the civil society as well as part of the technical group, which was led by the Kenya National Civil Society Center and the Muslims for Human Rights, Muhuri. It was overseen by an oversight group which comprised of other 14 government authorities and agencies and other 13 civil society organizations as well. So you'll see a little bit later when we present on the findings. The report itself took about 2 years of us working with the PBO authority to develop this, and it was the report, as you might see or notice later on as well, it is a very strong. The report itself is strong as a result of the diversity of opinions and perspectives in which it was developed over the last 2 years. That being my opening remarks, I will come back a little bit later to go through the findings as well and just give a little bit more details on what is in the content of the report that we're launching here today. Thank you very much.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to pass the apologies of Director General Financial Reporting Center, who would have wished to be with us this morning, but unfortunately he was held up in some pressing work commitments outside of Nairobi. He asked me to convey to you his remarks during this auspicious launch of the non-profit organization Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment. Dr. Raymond Omolo, CBS, PS for Internal Security and National Administration. Mr. Lyndon Nicholas Otieno, Director General, PBORA, Global Center on Cooperative Security, other distinguished guests present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Financial Reporting Center is delighted to join the Public Benefits Organizations Regulatory Authority in launching the inaugural non-profit organization Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment. The authority, formerly known as the NGO Coordination Board, has been a key stakeholder in the anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism landscape, both as a member of the National Task Force on AML-CFT and the Law Enforcement Coordination Group. The Center wishes to appreciate the strong working relationship and particularly having played a pivotal role in carrying out the NPO-TF risk assessment. The Center is optimistic that the findings will help in formulating effective measures to prevent or mitigate the abuse of NPOs for terrorism financing purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, NPOs play a vital role in the country's economy in supporting various aspects, including social justice, health, education, and environmental matters. They enhance the government's efforts to reach marginalized communities and deliver essential services. Notably, NPOs rely heavily on donations and as a result face the risk of being abused for terrorism financing. Indeed, the sector has been abused where dubious NPOs have been formed with the sole purpose of terrorism financing. In some cases, money raised for charitable purposes has been diverted to fund terrorist activities. The report has identified the category of NPOs at risk for TF and isolated the specific features that will enable their proper oversight. Abuse of NPOs, knowingly or inadvertently, undermines the entire sector's reputation, financial institutions, and donors' trust. This has a disproportionate impact on NPO operations at the places where they are most needed. As you should already be aware, in February this year, the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, placed Kenya among jurisdictions under increased monitoring, commonly known as a grey list. This followed the outcome of the 2022 mutual evaluation exercise, which revealed AML and CFT deficiencies in our jurisdictions. The status necessitates and heralds a crucial stride towards a more informed and balanced approach in mitigating potential risks. We commend the collaborative effort that drove the development of this assessment, characterized by robust NPO engagement, a practice that is endorsed as best by FATF. As I conclude, allow me to highlight the new requirements set forth by the FATF. The updated Recommendation 8 mandates that countries implement targeted, proportionate, and risk-based measures to tackle identified terrorism financing risks. Consequently, the authority must ensure that the measures adopted comply with this requirement. In closing, the Center remains committed to supporting the authority as per the existing MOU in its oversight role in preventing the sector's abuse for tourism financing and to ensure that the same is done in accordance with the FATF standards and Kenya's legal framework. Thank you and happy holidays.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hands together to welcome our chief guest. Dr. Raymond.
Thank you. Let's be seated. The Acting Director General of Public Benefits Organizations Regulatory Authority, Mr. Lyndon. the representative of the CEO FRC, Mr. Mungai, Mr. Koech, who is the representative of the Global Center for Cooperative Security, partners within the PBO sector, the CSOs represented here, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning once again. I've noticed the energy levels have gone down. I don't know whether it's because it's the end of the year. Guys can't wait to take a break. So today we are here to look at or to launch the report on the risk assessment for non-profit organizations. And this is a report that has been jointly worked on by the PBO Regulatory Authority together with the sector players, the non-profit organizations, with the support of the Global Center for Cooperative Security. And maybe if we think about it broadly, someone might be asking, so why are we even having a conversation about the report? And if you look back where we're coming from, and one of the speakers has spoken to it, is that 2 years back, there was an assessment that had been done in the run-up to that period that looked at how we are open or transparent in a number of financial transactions, particularly international transactions. And because we belong to a number of these international institutions that are set up to look into particularly the financial sector, then we failed in a number of respects. And that led the country being put on the grey list. And more so with regards to issues around anti-money laundering processes, as well as countering the financing for terrorism activities. And as a country, we have an obligation to conform. And we began a journey towards trying to address the gaps that were identified, to address the concerns that were raised. Now, what we are doing today is actually in response to trying to address some of those gaps that were picked. And therefore, I'm honored to be with you today to participate in the launch of the Terrorist Financing Sectoral Risk Assessment Report for the non-profit organizations. Now, the launch of this report is not only a culmination of months of dedicated research and collaboration, but also a crucial step forward in safeguarding Kenya's non-profit sector against potential threats. And today's occasion is testament to Kenya's commitment to addressing the emerging global challenges in counter-terrorism financing, as guided by the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force. From the outset, I would want to commend the Public Benefit Organization Regulatory Authority and its partners for their efforts in conducting the assessment and compiling this insightful report. And if you remember, previously we had the NGO Coordination Board. And there had been a law that was passed way back in 2013 that had been stuck in the shelves for more than 10 years. And the president did actually assent to that law early this year, which then gave birth to the organization that was previously referred to as the NGO Coordination Board. And that organization is the Public Benefits Organization Regulatory Authority. With it, we have addressed a lot of issues, a lot of gaps, a lot of concerns that were raised by the players and actors within the civil society framework, but also to make it aligned with our constitutional reality. Now, the assessment that we are launching today was conducted with the overarching objective of ensuring that non-profit organizations are not abused in any way by terrorists or terrorist organizations or their sympathizers. And the PBO Regulatory Authority is under firm instructions to institute measures to ensure that there are no sham non-profit organizations disguising as legitimate entities and legitimate non-profit organizations, which then become conduits for terrorist financing. As you are aware, Kenya was in February placed under increased monitoring by the Financial Action Task Force, a reminder of the pressing need to enhance our anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing frameworks. And one of the key areas highlighted was the importance of conducting a terrorism financing risk assessment for the non-profit sector. And we'll be listening to see what the report has come up with, or what the team found out. And today as a country, we are proud that we have made a few steps forward in our patriotic duty of addressing this matter. And I remain hopeful that other aspects raised will soon be addressed. And just for your information, we have prepared a raft of recommendations in the broader context of what the Financial Action Task Force had recommended. And we would be taking those to Parliament for consideration and eventually having them rolled out. Now, this report highlights the inherent vulnerabilities in our non-profit sector and the potential risks posed by terrorist financing. While the assessed threat level remains low to medium, we cannot afford to be complacent, and the risk assessment identifies key areas which, in my view, require our attention. And they include non-profit organizations operating in regions with active terrorist activities, particularly along our borders. Then number two is lack of adequate financing controls among some organizations. I'm aware we have a number of organizations operating as PBOs who for years have been unable to file their returns or even have disclosures on how they receive their resources as well as how those resources are expended. Number three is exposure to unverifiable funding sources, especially for non-profits from high-risk regions, particularly the regions that I've mentioned that are along the borders. And then lastly, the vulnerabilities that are posed by faith-based organizations. It's, however, gratifying that the report outlines key recommendations to mitigate these risks. And some of those include strengthening our regulatory frameworks, fostering interagency collaboration, and increasing capacity building efforts for both government and non-profit organizations. And looking at the number of agencies and institutions that were involved in this assessment, it goes to demonstrate that we are actually making the right steps along fostering the collaboration across various agencies. Now, the operationalization of the PBO Act earlier this year is a significant milestone in this front, and the legislation aligns with our legal framework with international standards and paves the way for improved governance and oversight of the non-profit sector in our country. In fact, the PBO Act brings into the regulatory purview of the PBO authority charitable institutions undertaking projects not just in this country, but also in the neighboring countries who happen to have their offices domiciled in Kenya. We have similarly introduced new classes to Kenya's immigration regulations that recognize and process persons or members working for charitable organizations. This was just published earlier this week. Enhancing interagency cooperation to ensure efficient monitoring and risk mitigation, building capacity within our regulatory bodies, such as the PBO Regulatory Authority, to execute targeted proportionate, and effective actions, and also being able to support non-profit organizations in adopting robust regulatory measures to prevent exploitation. This should now be our area of focus in the implementation of the recommendations from this report. The government stands firm in its commitment to transparency, accountability, and fairness, and we will not only meet our international obligations but also protect the invaluable contributions of the non-profit sector to the Kenyan socio-economic development. And if you look at what we are doing as government in terms of digitizing government services and operations in terms of improving on efficiency, it also helps us with transparency so that Kenyans can see where the monies are coming from, where the monies are going to, as well as help with accountability mechanisms. Ladies and gentlemen, this launch marks a start, not an end. It's a call to action for all stakeholders, whether you represent a government body, a non-profit institution, or an international partner. You play a key part in this team effort. This report should be more than just words on paper. Let it be a blueprint for proactive measures that will safeguard Kenya's non-profit sector while allowing it to flourish in delivering on the charitable objectives for which they are registered. As I conclude, I would want to thank all those who have worked tirelessly in the entire process that has led to the development of this report. And your dedication and expertise are the backbone of this milestone. Together, let's take this moment to reaffirm our commitment to a safer and more secure country. We all endeavor to ensure that there is no clandestine diversion of funds intended for legitimate purpose, which at some point in the business ends up in the business of terrorist purposes. We should promote accountability for greater confidence among the non-profit organizations across the donor community, the financial institutions, and the general public, that funds and services reach the intended legitimate beneficiaries. Thank you, and may you continue working together for the prosperity of our nation. And as I take back my seat, I want to wish all of you happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
All right then. Right up to this moment, I'd like to invite Mr. Victor Kikoech to just briefly come and take us through, and then we'll back to what has made us gather here today.
Just bear with me for a second. Let me pull up the presentation. Great. So again, my name is Victor Kikoech, and I work for the Global Center. My presentation is just a brief overview of what the report we're launching here today entails and the details within the report itself. So the presentation overview, I will cover 4 key areas that summarize the content of this report that we're here to witness its launch today. But first, let me start with a very brief background on why this risk assessment was important. I'll start with, you've heard, the next slide please. You've heard of the Financial Action Task Force being mentioned here today, and throughout my presentation, I will refer to this body as either FATA for FATF, and it is the international standard setting body for anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism around the globe. And Kenya is one of the founding members of its regional body known as ASAMLAC, and ASAMLAC itself conducts peer evaluation of its member countries from time to time, and it comes up with what is referred to a mutual evaluation report. And this is what has been referred to and talked about as about 2 years ago, we had the country go through this assessment, and we had a report with various recommendations. So I will also make a lot of reference throughout my presentation to one of the 40 recommendations of FATF. So the specific one that is relevant to the NPO sector is Recommendation 8. So I'll refer to it as either Recommendation 8 or Rec 8. Next slide, please. Since the adoption of Kenya's Mutual Evaluation Report in September of 2022, Kenya has made progress on some of the recommendations, or some of the recommendations from the evaluation from the report itself, including making amendments to its AML-CFT legislation, and it brings. Yes. Yes, 5 minutes. That's my time. I'll make sure to stick to that. So among the ways in which Kenya committed to implementing the action plan by FATF after the report was revising the framework for NPO's regulations in the country, and oversight to ensure that mitigating measures are risk-based and do not disrupt and discourage legitimate activities. So today is the culmination of this process. There's a report we're launching as a result of looking at the various things that form a risk assessment. Next slide, please. The next one, yes. So FATF's Recommendation 8, I have a slide here on what it highlights, but the 3 key things that for countries concerning NPOs according to Recommendation 8 is for countries to review their current laws and regulations. That's what we did for this report. And then after doing that, countries are expected to apply focused and proportionate measures to protect the NPOs from terrorism financing abuse. That's also what some of the recommendation in that report. And all of this should be done in line with a risk-based approach. And a risk-based approach can only be achieved if you have done a risk assessment process. And that is another reason as to why this is important. The next slide. Yes, so through this process, the next one, sorry. So through this process, we have key things that are very important to always remember when doing this type of a risk assessment. And a lot of times we get this question as, is this a risk assessment for all the NPOs in the country? And the answer to that is no. So FATF itself has specific NPOs, a specific definition for what an NPO is. So not all NPOs within the laws, within our laws here in Kenya would fall into that definition. So we only looked at FATF NPOs, which is still a really huge number of NPOs within our country. And then not all NPOs as well are high risk. Some of them may represent little to no risk at all. Next slide, please. And this was the process of the risk assessment. So in the first year of 2022, we looked at the threats, which are mostly external things. So what are, say, for example, the terrorist group that operates within our borders or within the countries. And then we also looked at internal things that affect the NPO. So what are the vulnerabilities within various CSOs and NPOs? And then we come up with what is known as the inherent risks. And then in this year, 2024, what we did was took the inherent risks that we had found in the first year, and we looked at mitigating measures. So what does government already have, and then what does the NPOs themselves have as internal measures? And when you look at that against the inherent risk, is now what you have the remaining risk, which is the residual risk. So in the report we have that as well and offer recommendations. So let me quickly run through the findings. And as I start on the findings, this was the people we sampled, or the method in which we applied for this risk assessment. We had interviews, we had data from the suspicious transaction reports. This was from the FRC. We had NPOs themselves. The lead NPO group in the technical group did several NPOs were surveyed across the country. 377 responses were received. And we also had a number of literature review on looking at the Kenya National Risk Assessment and the like. So on what you might remember that I mentioned that there's just what we looked at FATF NPOs. So in Kenya, under the definition of what public benefit organization is, all of this could fall into that definition. But with FATF NPOs, and what we looked at in this assessment is on the right side, from where I'm standing on the right side. So the NGOs, which are domestic, foreign, CBOs as well, and then companies limited by guarantee. These are registered by Business Registration Service, the trusts, and the faith-based organizations. So all of this are what we looked at, but others that do not fall, that are NPOs but do not fall in the category of NPOs are self-help groups, social justice, and political parties. We do not look at that at all. So on the nature of the, what is the threat that we found, or what is it that we that we found as a major threat in Kenya? So in Kenya we have the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, and it prevents the primary terrorism risk that was raised and came up in all these reports and analyses that we did. Al-Shabaab is the main terrorist group operating within the region. And the nature of the threat, as mentioned by the peers, includes these 4 areas where one, abusing the NPOs to raise funds, to conceal and move the funds as well. And then there's a diversion of legitimate NPO resources for terrorist actors, and this is usually as well what we would say is a development of an operational relationship with an NPO or individuals within an NPO to support a terrorist group. Next slide, please. These are also just a list of other risk factors for terrorism abuse that we highlight on the report. So there are 8 vulnerability areas that we came across, and we gave it ratings on how significant it is and how prevalent that vulnerability is within the sector. Just back, sorry. Yes, and as it has been mentioned again before, you'll see, say, vulnerability for NPOs with unverified and unverifiable funding sources. We rated this one, the significance for this one as medium. The prevalence, though, is low medium. So when you look at that, this is what entails, or what gives that final general rating for the risk assessment of the country. On reviewing mitigating measures, we look at the laws, the internal NPO procedures, we look at them as, we review them if they are targeted, if they are proportional, they are risk-based as well, and that we make sure, or we look at those measures to see if they're non-disruptive or disruptive to the sector, and whether they're effective. So FATF as well emphasizes the point on effectiveness, to make sure that in as much as you have the law, but how does this law, how has it been used before? Is it effective? And if you have a record of this for the FRC, for example, or various other bodies, those are the type of reports that we would look at. The recommendations that we have in the report include competent authorities should develop mechanisms to identify the specific NPOs that are potentially at risk. This is mainly the NPOs that operate within the Kenya-Somali border, all the way from the north to the south, and the ones that operate in high-risk areas where terrorist groups operate. Next slide. This is also another range of recommendations. And the only one I would want to highlight in this section is what has already been mentioned, that the PBO authority already has presented a number of amendments to the current PBO Act to ensure that they do not disrupt or discourage PBO activities. So the report encourages that we looked at Section 11, Section 8, and Section 30 of the PBO Act, and forward them for amendment, which I'm happy that the PBO authority has already done so. Yes, there was finally, when we did the risk assessment, or when we did the second part of the risk assessment, we had concluded this risk assessment according to the old law, and then when the PBO Act was operationalized a few months ago, we had to go back and look at what does the Act say and what is it that we found. So we updated that report. So the report itself is an updated report according to the PBO Act. And it has also been mentioned that FATF or FATF has updated Recommendation 8. So we also made sure that with the updated Recommendation 8, and the next time our country goes through a risk assessment, where everything within the report covers that. One of the things that the report recommends is there was a process of establishing a religious affairs commission, so it was a little bit difficult for us to find data as well as responses from the faith-based organization. But for FATF, the sector that usually has the highest risk is usually faith-based organizations in a number of countries. So we had recommended that when it comes into effect, the Religious Affairs Commission, they're given the powers to oversee, and also they're encouraged to urge faith-based organizations or with the members within their organization to always report and make sure that they're updated on the risks that faces the country. So with that very quick overview on the report, that is all we had within the report. But I encourage you to go through the report itself. It will be posted online, and also there are a number of copies going around the room, but I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to me.
All right, thank you so much, Victor. So, right about this moment, the moment we've all been waiting for, the launch of the Terrorism Finance Sectoral Risk Assessment Report for non-profit organization. So, at this particular point, I would love to invite our chief guest, PS, together with his host, to kindly come where the launch will take place. And the rest of the room, let us all rise up for this moment. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. So, at the count of 3, let us all clap as officially we launch the report. So in 3, 2, 1, let's go! So it's officially, we've launched, so we can, yes, as we take a photo. Do you have a copy? All right, let's keep on clapping. Let us clap. All right, thank you. Alright, DJ, we can play some soft music. I'm being informed that breakfast is still on outside, so don't leave kindly. Alright, you can sit.